of state. From Westminster, Damien Grammaticus reports.
This is a time of change and continuity too. Written in Westminster's stones, King's Past, as a new one ascends at the apex of things.
I swear by Almighty God that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty King Charles, his heirs and successors, according to law, so help me God.
I swear by Almighty God that I will be...
MPs didn't have to make a new pledge today, but those that chose to could also choose the form it took.
According to law, so help me God.
I do solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty King Charles, his heirs and successors, according to law.
So even in this time of mourning, political life moves forward. New king with his new prime minister and her new cabinet. The tone relaxed, almost familiar. A former prime minister says the king has been preparing for this moment.
I had audiences with Prince Charles when Queen Elizabeth II was still on the throne, because he wanted to start thinking about how to conduct those audiences. And from what I saw, he will be brilliant at that job, brilliant at listening, brilliant at asking questions, giving wise advice and sage counsel. I mean, this has probably been the longest apprenticeship in history.
Your Majesty.
Ushered in next, Sir Keir Starmer with praise for the new king's first address.
I thought his speech yesterday was fantastic.
Who did you? It was so reassuring.
So reassuring, he said.
Really pensive.
Then the Liberal Democrat leader. He gave condolences and said he hoped to discuss shared interests with the king.
We'd love to talk to you about some issues on the environment and the changes, because we're going first of all from the sincerity. So thank you very much.
And finally, the Scottish National Party's leader in Westminster. In the coming days, the king will tour the nation. Edinburgh, Cardiff and Belfast. The Prime Minister will accompany him as the nation prepares for the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II. Damien Grammaticus, BBC News, Westminster.
The Queen travelled widely across the UK throughout her long reign, and it's thought that nearly a third of the country saw or even met her during her lifetime. One of the places she visited a number of times was Bolton in Lancashire, and our special correspondent Jeremy Cook has been to the town to speak to people who met and admired her.
Away from the capital and the palace and the crowds, a nation's quiet grief. Quiet, but profoundly felt.
She's beautiful. There'll never be another one like her, will there? I mean, tears just streamed down my face, and you've got to believe it, but it's difficult, isn't it? Yeah.
There's sadness here, of course, but gratitude too. So many lives touched by their queen. Telegrams and cards that mean so much.
I got one, a special one for my diamond wedding. It's nice with that Buckingham Palace envelope. Yeah. We've treasured that,
Her Majesty the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh leave Bolton Town Hall.
Bolton, in our northern heartlands, a royal destination over several decades. In 2009, it was Warburton's Bakery. A short visit, but lifelong memories.
She made me feel exceedingly important, and that's what I remember about her. She was all about me on that day.
Would it be ridiculous of me to say that that moment, that exchange, actually changed your life?
It did, yes, because I'm still talking about it 13 years later, and, you know, I'd met the Queen, and I remember she walked away and she turned back to me, she said, "Keep up the good work." And I said to my colleague at the side, I said, "Wow."
The passing of a monarch is a loss felt in all corners of the country.
In offering our deepest condolences and sympathies in passing of our late Queen Elizabeth II.
In every one of our communities.
She was not just the Queen, she was our Queen, Queen for all communities, whichever faith you were from. In particular, I'd like to sort of pass my condolences from the community of Mecca Mosque and the community as a whole. She was our Queen, and we deeply gonna miss her.
Al, the bus driver, is a proud monarchist.
Good to see you. On your break.
His patriotic outfit, a heartfelt tribute.
I think the whole world is going to miss her. Really, the whole world is going to miss. They are. What can we do? We can move on and, as I say, support our new king.
Take a moment then.
Karen is all about helping and supporting Bolton's younger generation. She knows the inspiration that the Queen has given, especially on her visits to this town.
It makes the community feel like they matter. As individuals, as a community, as a town, that, you know, we're not just a place forgotten up in the north when the Queen comes to see us, so really, really important.
Last word to Tilly, a personal tribute across the generations.
Thank you for looking after the country and caring. Hope that you rest in peace.
Jeremy Cook, BBC News, Bolton.
Let's bring you up to date with some other news now, some big developments in Ukraine, because after months of deadlock, Ukraine's counter-offensive against Russia is gathering momentum, with more territory recaptured in the south and the east of the country. Ukrainian troops are now said to have entered Kupiansk, a railway city that has acted as a key logistics centre for Russian forces in the northeast since February. In some areas, the Russian retreat is said to have been a rout, and there are reports that the Russians have pulled out from the town of Izyum. Moscow says to regroup elsewhere, but let's bring you more from our central Ukrainian correspondent and senior international correspondent, Ola Guerin, who is there.
Ukraine's rapid counter-offensive is gaining ground. Its troops taking some casualties, but also taking territory on several fronts, catching Russian forces off guard, even surprising some Ukrainians. This footage was filmed by Ukrainian forces. We can't document the battles ourselves. For now, journalists have been banned from the front lines. Kyiv determined to win the information war. And images of victory from the eastern city of Kupiansk. This was a key logistics hub for President Putin's men. In some areas, Russia's front line has collapsed. And liberation has come. Everything is okay, troops tell locals in the town of Valaklia. For 6 months we prayed you would come, she says. Natalia, too, endured months under occupation by the Russians, who she calls fascists. She and her husband Volodymyr were freed by the counter-offensive, but still show signs of their trauma.
When you saw the Ukrainian soldiers, when you realized they had come to free you, what was that moment like? What were your feelings?
We thought we would never see them. And then our boys came. And they were so handsome. So beautiful. Especially compared to the fascists. I didn't know what to do with them, if I should hug them or hold their hands. I touched them, and I was very happy.
Ukrainian social media has been flooded with patriotic videos. The national anthem, now a battle hymn for troops who believe that momentum is swinging their way. But the Russians still hold around 1/5 of Ukraine, including the city of Kherson. This was the resistance on the streets back in March. It was the first major Ukrainian city to fall after the invasion. We managed to reach a woman still living there who says the Russians are starting to lie low. For her protection, we aren't naming her, and her words are spoken by a BBC producer.
Over the past 2 or 3 days, the military seem to have quietened down a bit. They are less visible in cafes and restaurants. If street fighting starts, it will be very dangerous. I want to see our army here and thank them. I want to see their victory.
Scenes like this are cathartic for Ukraine and reassuring for its Western backers. No one imagines a swift end to the war. But the Ukrainians have now shown they can beat the Russians in battle, not just outmaneuver them. Orla Gearan, BBC News, Central Ukraine.
We are just getting some new lines from President Zelensky. I'm not sure if this is his regular nightly address, but he has been saying that Ukrainian troops have recaptured now 2,000 kilometers of territory this month. He is also saying that Russian troops, the Russian army, are making the right choice to flee. We've just had those lines drop in the past few minutes or so, but we're going to take you live to Kyiv now to join our correspondent Hugo Pichega. Hugo, always very difficult to know exactly what is going on, to be able to verify some of these figures, particularly President Zelensky saying 2,000 kilometers of territory this month. But would you say that this is what we're seeing now, the most significant Ukrainian advance for months?
It is significant, Lucy. It is the biggest shift in position since the Russian forces left the towns around the capital, Kyiv, in April. It is a massive gain for the Ukrainians. Also, not only because of the numbers, President Zelensky talking about more than 30 villages and towns being liberated in the east, but also the significance of some of those villages and towns being liberated. Earlier today, we had reports of the Ukrainian forces entering the town of Kupiansk, which is a major transport hub for the Russians, is a major place used by the Russians to resupply troops in the east. And then the Russians say that Russian troops had abandoned the city of Izium, which was a major hub being used by the Russians in the east of the country. And now reports that local authorities in areas occupied by the Russians in the Kharkiv region telling people to evacuate, and footage and pictures on social media showing queues of cars with people trying to leave those occupied areas. Now, we've seen pictures, we've seen footage of people in those areas that have been liberated by the Ukrainian forces, residents out in the streets welcoming Ukrainian soldiers with kisses and hugs. So it is a massive victory for the Ukrainians and could be a decisive turning point in this war.
Yeah, Hugo, it's being seen by many as really a humiliating setback for the Russians. Has there been any official response to this from Moscow?
Well, apart from the statement that the Russians said that they were regrouping troops from Izium and the city of Clear in the east of the country, we haven't had confirmation from the Russians that many of those villages have been lost. But we're hearing from official or pro-Russian Telegram channels and social media accounts some reporters and people in those regions talking about the desperate situation for Russian troops, calling for President Putin to declare this special military operation a war, which could lead to a national mobilization and recruitment of people. And for weeks we've been hearing about Russian troops refusing to fight, complaining that they are understaffed and under-equipped. So it seems that the morale is really, really low in some of those parts of the country occupied by the Russians. But we haven't had confirmation yet that all those villages have been lost by the Russians.
And Hugo, are we hearing or seeing any stories coming out of those liberated towns? Have there been any allegations of Russian war crimes?
We have not, and there's a reason for that, because the Ukrainians have banned the work of journalists on those front lines. So we haven't had independent confirmation, we haven't heard independent reporting coming from those areas because of the restrictions that have been implemented by the Ukrainian forces. But this is remarkable, even those accounts coming from the Ukrainian forces, because for weeks we talked about the counter-offensive in the south of the country, and it seems that the Ukrainians saw an opportunity to attack Russian positions in the east. Russian forces had been redeployed to defend positions in the south of the country. So it seems that the Ukrainians saw an opportunity to go out with this counter-offensive in the east and launch this surprise counter-offensive, and that's why perhaps we're seeing this rapid advance by Ukrainian forces in the east of the country.
And Hugo, how much do you think the success of the Ukrainian forces at the moment helps with President Zelensky's message to the rest of the world that he needs more weaponry, more precision weaponry as well, and aid?
Well, it's very significant because I think the Ukrainians are going to use these advances if they are confirmed, and obviously if the advances hold, that the Ukrainians have the capacity, have the ability to reclaim territory that's been occupied by the Russians. For months we've talked about how static this conflict has become, with no significant changes in terms of military positions. For weeks the Ukrainians had been using these sophisticated weapons being provided by the West to attack Russian positions away from the front lines. But up until now we haven't seen these dramatic changes in terms of positions. So I think the Ukrainians are going to use these advances to show their Western partners that they can go ahead with a counter-offensive. They can reclaim territory that's been occupied by the Russians. But I think the message has been very clear. They want more weapons, and they want more weapons now.
Hugo, it looks like an absolutely miserable evening with the weather there in Kyiv. We really appreciate you bringing us up to date on what is very significant with that counter-offensive against the Russians really gaining momentum. Go inside, get dry. Thank you very much for joining us from Kyiv. The UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, has said that Pakistan needs massive financial support following devastating floods that have marooned vast parts of the country. He's on the second day of his visit to Pakistan. He described the situation as unimaginable. More than 1,400 people have died. Millions have been forced to leave their homes. Authorities in Sindh province have made further breaches to the country's largest freshwater lake, the Manchar, to prevent floodwaters breaking through the embankments there. And there are ancient ruins in the south of Sindh near the Indus River. They're around 4,500 years old. They are considered among the best preserved urban settlements in South Asia. Our correspondent Sahib Balak has been to visit the site.
I'm in the southeastern province of Sindh right now, where I got to know that the site of Mohenjo-daro has been badly damaged. As soon as I reached here, I saw a lot of laborers working here, trying to repair whatever the rain has damaged. What I was told was that in mid-August, it rained more than usual. It rained around 1,400 millimeter, which is more than this place has ever received since it was discovered in 1922, which was around 100 years ago. If you look at this site, the protective layer, which is the outer layer of the stupa, has been totally damaged, but the original layer, the original stupa, is completely fine. I spoke with a few experts around here as well, and what they told me was that what protected this space was the fact that these ancient drains, which is around 4,500 years old, actually helped the rain to drain out of this place. It did not take any machinery, it did not take any laborers to help drain out the water, which is a marvel in itself. At the moment, the biggest worry for the people is, especially for the administration, is to protect this place and to bring it back to how it originally was. Most of the stupas around here have 5 layers of protection around them, and if one of them has been broken, it really jeopardizes the entire situation for this area. It is the oldest site possible in Sindh, and to protect it is the #1 worry for the government right now. And what I've been told so far is that they want to make as much reparations over here and to repair it as better as it used to look before.
Sahib Balak there, looking at how the authorities in Sindh are trying to really protect those ancient ruins. We're going to continue our coverage of the accession of King Charles. The official proclamation took place not just in London today, but also in Ottawa, in Canada, where he replaces the Queen as head of state. Queen Elizabeth made no fewer than 22 state visits there during her reign, more than any other country. Our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette, reports now on how Canadians are remembering the Queen.
This morning in Ottawa, bearskin hats and a bugle, a solemn ceremony to confirm a king.
His Royal Highness Prince Charles Philip Arthur George is now, by the death of our late sovereign, Charles III.
A new head of state, Canada one of 14 Commonwealth countries, former colonies, which still keep the crown.
Thank you again for your welcome. It is very good to be home.
For 7 decades, she drew the crowds here, old and new generations gathering to greet her, displaying affection for her and for what she loved. From corgi fan clubs in the capital, Ottawa, to fast horses at the Calgary Stampede in the west, Prince Philip enjoying himself too, always at her side. In the east of this former colony, visits to 18th century villages. The Queen crisscrossed the world's second largest mass many times, visiting every single province and territory, embracing Canadian culture, including its national sport.
I think it's absolutely wonderful. She's really touched the spirit of what being a Canadian is all about.
But often, the Queen was on thin ice.
The separatist extremists were making their promised demonstration.
Sometimes the people who showed up came to protest. This was the scene in the mainly French-speaking province of Quebec in 1964, when separatist sentiment was at its highest, anger over English domination. The Queen knew it, never showed it, steering a middle course.
Ottawa is a small capital.
From her very first visit as Queen in 1957, she always spoke both of Canada's official languages.
Veuillez vous seated. Veuillez vous asseoir.
Better than even some of Canada's politicians. Another difficult legacy of a darker imperial past.
The Indians were so delighted to meet the Great White Queen.
For Canada's Indigenous community, the monarchy also symbolizes dispossession, discrimination, horrific abuses Canada's leaders are still confronting. This morning's ceremony to welcome the King sends another signal. The monarch's representative, Governor-General Mary Simon, is the first Indigenous person to hold this role. Other change could be coming. Recent polls show only a small minority of Canadians feel the monarchy still matters in their lives. But for now, it's still a constant. Lise Doucette, BBC News, Ottawa.
I'm joined now by Dr. Carolyn Harris. She is a royal historian and author based in Toronto. Carolyn, lovely to see you. I'm sure you can imagine that here in London, the events of the past few days, what we're witnessing can feel all-consuming. How is it for you in Canada?
Well, in Canada, there's been a tremendous amount of interest in the change in reign, as it's been 70 years since these ceremonies have unfolded. And in 1952, Canada was actually between governors general when Queen Elizabeth II succeeded to the throne on the 6th of February 1952. Winston Churchill had summoned Viscount Alexander back to the United Kingdom to be the defense minister, and the first Canadian-born Governor-General, Vincent Massey, had not yet taken office, so it was the administrator of Canada who made the announcement. So 1952 feels like a long time ago, and so there's a lot of interest in these events unfolding, and a lot of looking back at the Queen's very successful royal tours over the years, and the number of Canadians who she met from all walks of life.
It has not always been as successful in French-speaking Quebec, though. How much support is there still for the monarchy there?
Well, one of the challenges when we look at polling data regarding the monarchy is that there's personal respect for Queen Elizabeth II, and her mother, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, had some successful visits to Quebec as one of her regiments of the Black Watch was based in Montreal. But when we look at the monarchy as an institution, we see in certain provinces, particularly Quebec, that there is declining support for the constitutional monarchy. So it's interesting to see some people who are not necessarily monarchists separating their views on the monarchy from personal respect for the Queen's 7 decades of service.
Carolyn, we all watched very closely today when we saw the Prince of Wales, Prince William, his wife Catherine, Harry and Meghan as well, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, they were at Windsor. Do these royal couples have the same kind of star appeal in Canada that they do here?
Well, certainly the Prince and Princess of Wales had some very successful visits to Canada. Canada was the first country they visited as a newly married couple. In 2011, they crossed the country, they attended a citizenship ceremony, and had some lighthearted moments, like Prince William playing road hockey and the couple racing each other in dragon boats across Dalvey Lake. Their tour in 2016 was more somber. There was much more focus when they visited British Columbia and the Yukon on reconciliation with Indigenous peoples and engaging with Indigenous Canadians and the very difficult history there. So the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, now the Prince and Princess of Wales, have had some successful royal tours. Harry and Meghan lived in Canada for a time when they stepped back from their roles as senior members of the royal family, and there was speculation that they might make a life in Canada, but then they moved to California. But prior to them stepping back as senior members of the royal family, they made their debut as a couple at Invictus Games in Toronto in 2017, and that was a very exciting moment. So both of these royal couples are quite well known to Canadians.
Very interesting to get your thoughts. Dr. Carolyn Harris, thank you for joining us from Toronto.
Thank you.
I'm going to take you back now to Buckingham Palace. It's been the heart of the events over the past few days. People naturally gravitating there to share the mourning of the royal family. Our special correspondent Lucy Manning reports.
If ever there was a moment for a child to live through history, to understand kings and queens, to mark the moment one era transitioned into another, this was it. Just a few hundred from the crowds of thousands allowed outside St James's Palace to hear the new king proclaimed. The youngest, Orla Elizabeth, 11 weeks old.
It's history, isn't it? And I think by bringing her down today, it's something that we can talk to her about. She'll obviously be spoken to about the Queen because she's named after her. And then it's something that she can then pass on to her kids.
So what do you make of King Charles so far?
I think he's been absolutely incredible, really, and doing all of that, what he did yesterday, the day after his mother died, takes guts, and I thought he was absolutely magnificent.
A real sense of trying to involve the people, his subjects, to bring them along with the change. Knitted by their grandma, Lottie and Isabel had brought their queens. Why have you brought those down today, girls?
Because King Charles' mother was the queen. We went to put flowers down for the queen.
It's a moment of history. We wanted the girls to come and pay their respects and see the new king. It will be a changing era, but I think the public are behind Charles and King Charles, and we'll support him all the way.
Not everyone had the best view, but we are all living through, experiencing this new era.
Thankfully today I'm not crying because yesterday I was crying very much. So,
what did you make of the proclamation ceremony?
I mean, it's emotional. Oh my God, Prince Charles is a king and the Queen is not there anymore.
Buckingham Palace was enveloped by people, mournful, celebratory, a swirl of changing emotions.
There are vast crowds, 7, 8 people deep on both sides of the Mall. Everyone just trying to get a glimpse of the new king.
The royal car slowing so that everyone here could say they'd seen King Charles.
It was worth the wait. Brilliant.
How long did you wait for?
We think we've put in about 3 hours. So,
why did you want to come now?
I just wanted to be part of this. Just so important, just to be part of the moment.
And what do you make of the new king?
I like him. I like Charlie. He's good. Yeah, I really like Charlie.
Rufus, you just saw the king.
Yeah.
How was that?
Amazing. I won't forget it. Yeah.
A pilgrimage to the palace, flowers to remember the Queen, cheers to welcome the king. Lucy Manning, BBC News.
To remind you, it was announced today that the Queen's state funeral will take place on the morning of Monday, the 19th of September at Westminster Abbey. The Queen's cortege will leave Balmoral tomorrow and head to Edinburgh. Our correspondent James Lander has all the details.
Here are some of the key events coming up. Tomorrow morning at Balmoral, the Queen's gatekeepers will carry her body to a hearse, which will take the coffin on a 6-hour journey to the Palace of Holyrood House in Edinburgh. The following afternoon, the oak coffin will be carried in procession along the Royal Mile to St Giles's Cathedral, with the King and other members of the royal family following on foot. There'll be a service at the cathedral attended by members of the royal family. The Queen's body will lie in rest there for 24 hours in continuous vigil, so the public have a chance to pay their respects. Then on Tuesday afternoon, the coffin, accompanied by the Princess Royal, will be flown to Northolt Airport in London and taken on to Buckingham Palace. From there, on Wednesday afternoon, the Queen's body will be conveyed on a gun carriage up the Mall. The procession will pass through Horse Guards, down Whitehall, all the way to Westminster Hall, where the Archbishop of Canterbury will conduct a short service, attended by the King and the Queen Consort. For 4 days in this ancient building, the Queen will lie in state on a raised platform known as a catafalque, and many thousands are expected to file past the coffin. Then, on Bank Holiday Monday morning, the Queen's coffin will leave Westminster Hall and be taken by gun carriage to Westminster Abbey. Members of the royal family are expected to follow the coffin as part of the short procession. And then, at 11 o'clock on Monday, there'll be a full state funeral at the Abbey, after which the Queen will be laid to rest at St George's Chapel, Windsor.
And let's just show you now Buckingham Palace, where there are still hundreds of people who have gathered. They're milling around, laying floral tributes, sharing their memories. Many people just saying it's important for them to be there, to feel this moment of history. And that is something we're very much reflecting on our special live page that we have on the website. And I can really recommend going and taking a look at all of the different memories and thoughts that people are sharing. You can send us your memories as well of the Queen and her reign. We've got an online form there that you can fill in. The other thing that people are doing up and down the country, around the world in fact, is writing in books of condolences. They've been set up in numerous locations. And our correspondent Eunice Muller has been at Manchester Cathedral meeting some of those who have paid tribute.
The late Queen Elizabeth II visited Manchester many times during those moments of celebration, joy, but also during its darkest hour in the aftermath after that terror attack on the Manchester Arena. And over the past day or two, we've seen thousands and thousands of people come through the doors here of Manchester Cathedral to sign that book of condolence, but also to light a candle if they wish to do so. So let's have a quick chat with Julie Ann McCulloch and her family. You've travelled across from Stockport, haven't you? Why did you want to be here today?
The Queen has been a steady force in our world and in our community for so long, and for all of my life. And I wanted to come and just write a message. I wanted to tell her, even though she's never going to read it, that she was a woman of faith, a woman of integrity, that she cared about people. And she cared about them at happy times and at sad times, and she was never frightened to have a conversation with people and to share sorrow with them.
Many people here will have chosen their words carefully. For you, your background, you were telling me before, you're Northern Irish, and that's another reason why you wanted to be here.
Very much so. When politicians were frightened to say things, she was happy to say things. She kept politics out and she talked about people. She cared about our stories and she wanted to heal division instead of allowing division to continue.
You brought your daughter here as well. Sophia, let me have a quick chat with you. The Queen meant a lot to you, didn't she?
Yeah, because I was a brownie and she was a brownie as well, so I feel like it's something that I want to do when I'm older.
And you wrote a message, didn't you?
Yeah.
Tell me what you wrote.
I wrote something like, I was very sad that she passed away, but she was a kind, caring woman that looked after everyone and brownies, because she's a very special woman in my heart because she's a brownie and I'm a brownie.
Sophie couldn't have put it better. There's so many people who'll be saying exactly the same thing. Let's have a quick chat to Dad Jamie as well. Jamie, you were a bit reluctant to have a chat with me originally, but actually you have written a message and you really did want to emphasise that, didn't you?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've heard a lot of, and there's been a lot of words said, is just steadfastness and the dignity in which she performed her role, and it was just constant in my life. That's something that we've always known, but I think for me what was important, not just her service to our country and to other nations, but the way that she spoke about her faith was a main part of how she felt that she had the strength to carry out that role. In the Queen's lifetime there were many ups and many downs, but actually the way that she carried herself and the way that she continued to treat others, as Julianne had said, through those situations. And I think that was important for me as a person of faith myself. Even her Christmas messages, but I think most importantly it was the way that actually she acted that faith through her life, and I think that was obvious not just to us but I think to people across the world, and that's why it was really important for me to come today with our family, but into a place of worship, and to be able to kind of give thanks for that and appreciation for how that lived through her life, and she really did live out her faith through her life.
Okay, Jamie, Sophia and Julia, thanks very much for joining me today. Now the late Queen was actually here just over 12 months ago. At that time she was visiting politicians as she would do, but also ordinary members of the public, and listen to their stories after during the pandemic and how that had affected them. And I just want to sort of mention one message that was written before in the Book of Condolence. That person wrote, loyal to the end.
This is BBC News. I'm Lucy Hockings with the latest headlines. New details on the Queen's state funeral. It will be held in Westminster Abbey on Monday the 19th of September. King Charles approved the day as a bank holiday. Princes William and Harry and their wives Kate and Meghan greet crowds in Windsor. At Balmoral, the Queen's 3 younger children and their families viewed tributes to her after attending a church service. The new monarch read and signed an oath and paid tribute to the late Queen at the succession ceremony at St James's Palace, televised for the first time.
God save the King.
God save the King.
And outside, hundreds of people witnessed the ceremony of the proclamation up on a balcony of the palace.
Prince Charles Philip Arthur George is now, by the death of our late sovereign of happy memory, become our only lawful and rightful liege lord, Charles III.
Welcome to BBC News, broadcasting to viewers in the UK and around the world. We begin with news that was only confirmed a few hours ago. The state funeral for Queen Elizabeth will take place on Monday, the 19th of September at 11 a.m. BST at Westminster Abbey. Schools across the UK will close on the day of the funeral, giving thousands of youngsters the chance to watch the televised service and to pay their respects. We've also had more details of the key events that will happen in the next week as the funeral approaches. The Queen's coffin is to leave Balmoral tomorrow, Sunday the 11th, at 10 a.m. local time. It will be carried by 6 of the estate's gamekeepers. It will be taken to the Palace of Holyrood in Edinburgh by road to arrive at 4 o'clock. On the afternoon of Monday the 12th, there will be a short procession of the coffin along the Royal Mile to St Giles's Cathedral, with the King and Queen Consort following on foot. A service will be held. It will be attended by members of the royal family, and the Queen will remain at St Giles's for a short period of lying at rest. In the evening, there will be a vigil. The Queen's coffin will be taken to Edinburgh Airport at 5 o'clock in the afternoon of Tuesday the 13th of September. It will be flown to London, accompanied by the Princess Royal. It will arrive at Buckingham Palace in the evening, witnessed by King Charles and the Queen Consort. The next day, we're Wednesday now, September the 14th, at just after 2 o'clock in the afternoon, The Queen's coffin will be adorned with the crown and a wreath of flowers and travel on a gun carriage from Buckingham Palace to Westminster Hall in silence. The route will take in Queen's Gardens, the Mall, Horse Guards and Horse Guards' Arch, Whitehall, Parliament Street, Parliament Square and New Palace Yard. King Charles and members of the royal family will join the procession. It's being described as a small and personal procession. During that procession, there will be guns fired at Hyde Park and Big Ben will toll. The Queen will lie in state at Westminster Hall for 4 full days after a short service by the Archbishop of Canterbury. The lying in state will end on September the 19th, the day of the Queen's funeral. Flying in state will end at 06:30 in the morning of September the 19th, the day the Queen's funeral takes place at 11 o'clock in the morning. Well, King Charles was officially confirmed as monarch, even though he had assumed the role on the death of Queen Elizabeth at a ceremony at St James's Palace in London. And while that oath-taking ceremony dates back centuries, it was televised for the first time on Saturday. Our royal correspondent Nicholas Witchell reports.
In the setting of London's original royal palace at St James's, the Accession Council, Britain's political leaders past and present with other notable figures, there to pledge their allegiance to Britain's new head of state.
God save the King.
God save the King.
The King joined the Accession Council gathered in the palace's throne room to make his declaration.
It is my most sorrowful duty to announce to you the death of my beloved mother, the Queen. I know how deeply you, the entire nation, and I think I may say the whole world, sympathize with me in the irreparable loss we've all suffered. My mother's reign was unequaled in its duration, its dedication, and its devotion. Even as we grieve, we give thanks for this most faithful life. I am deeply aware of this great inheritance and of the duties and heavy responsibilities of sovereignty which have now passed to me. In taking up these responsibilities, I shall strive to follow the inspiring example I have been set in upholding constitutional government and to seek the peace, harmony and prosperity of the peoples of these islands and of the Commonwealth realms and territories throughout the world. And in carrying out the heavy task that has been laid upon me, and to which I now dedicate what remains to me of my life, I pray for the guidance and help of Almighty God.
Concerning the security of the Church of Scotland.
The King took a centuries-old oath to preserve the position of the Church of Scotland.
I, Charles III, by the grace of God, of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and of my other realms and territories, King, Defender of the Faith, do faithfully promise and swear that I shall inviolably maintain and preserve the settlement of the true Protestant religion as established by the laws made in Scotland.
Watched by the heir to the throne, Prince William, Prince of Wales, and Camilla the Queen Consort, he signed the oath Charles R. Charles Rex, King. And then a moment of pageantry. From a balcony, the Garter King of Arms issued the proclamation of the new king's reign.
Whereas it has pleased Almighty God to call to his mercy our late sovereign lady, Queen Elizabeth II, of blessed and glorious memory, by whose decease the crown of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland is solely and rightfully come to the Prince Charles Philip Arthur George. We, therefore, do now hereby, with one voice and consent of tongue and heart, publish and proclaim that the Prince Charles Philip Arthur George is now, by the death of our late sovereign of happy memory, become our only lawful and rightful liege lord, Charles III.
The King's Guard gave 3 cheers.
3 cheers for His Majesty the King. Hip hip! Hip hip! Hip hip!
Following centuries-old tradition, the proclamation was also issued in the City of London. It will be repeated in Britain's other national capitals tomorrow.
Hooray! Hip hip!
Affirming and proclaiming the reign of Charles III to all corners of his kingdom. Nicholas Witchell, BBC News.
Well, members of the royal family have been out meeting members of the public outside 3 royal residences, Balmoral, Windsor Castle and Buckingham Palace, and we'll bring you details of what happened at all of those locations. But let's start with King Charles, who late on Saturday afternoon left Buckingham Palace and was driven to Claret's house. That's the building which has been his London residence, but look at what happened. It's just a very short distance up the Mall, but he got out of the car. He came outside to meet members of the public who have come to pay their respects. This was somewhat of a surprise. He did this, of course, on Friday when he first returned to London from Scotland, but we weren't necessarily expecting him to do it again. And look at the faces of people there, absolutely thrilled to be meeting with their new king. Our correspondent Charlotte Gallagher is there for us at Buckingham Palace, and I asked her how everyone responded when he got out of the car.
There were cheers, almost screams really, Lucy, because some people have waited all day to see King Charles. They've been pressed against the barriers, hoping that he would do another walkabout and meet people. And it really was. People were ecstatic when he finally came out. What we heard was the car suddenly coming out of Buckingham Palace, and as soon as people saw that it had the royal standard on top of the car and he was in the car, there were just huge, huge cheers. Spoke to lots of families that have come down here today with their children. They want them to witness this historic moment, and a lot of the children have been talking about, of course, their memory of the Queen is the Jubilee and Paddington. That's how they know her, which is really, really lovely to see. And it's a Saturday night, you know, people are coming down after work, they've been working all day or they've been in town. They've really wanted to come and pay their respects and also to welcome the new king. Now, these ladies, you live in London, but you decided to come down tonight, didn't you?
Yes.
And what did you think when you heard the news?
It was just a surprise, I think. I wasn't expecting it to happen this soon.
And what were your memories of the Queen?
I did actually see her once in Scotland when she opened up a new railway track there.
And had you gone especially to see the Queen at that point? And what did you make of her?
I couldn't really see her from, I was quite far away, but she just seemed very nice and respectful.
And it's the end of an era because we've all grown up with the Queen, haven't we? She's been in all our lives.
Yeah, she's been a constant, but I mean, we've only had one monarch, so she's been a constant for the last 26 years.
And of course, probably we'll never have another Queen in our lifetime. It's going to be kings now.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy.
How do you feel about that?
I mean, it's great to have a female leading the country, but yeah, I think the others will do a good job.
And what about the atmosphere down here tonight? So many people, thousands.
Yeah, it's crammed, but yeah, I think it's very sombre. It's weird. It's a weird atmosphere in town.
Yeah. And it's the end of an era for the UK and the Commonwealth, so many people.
Yeah. No,
and why did you want to come down tonight?
Just to pay my respects, really, and because she's been there like as long as I've been alive, obviously.
Yeah, and having a king, it's such a change, isn't it? People need to remember not to say Prince Charles, say King Charles this time. Yeah. It's really lots of people saying that. It's so strange almost, having Prince Charles in your life this long and then suddenly now he's King Charles. Lots of other people coming down. Let's have a seat, grab a few more people. Excuse me. Hi, we're from BBC News. Do you want having a quick chat? Why did you come down here tonight?
Just to pay our respects to the Queen.
And are you from London?
We moved out of London a couple of weeks ago, but yeah, we've lived here for a decade or so.
And you just came down specifically to lay the flowers today?
Yes.
And how did you feel when you heard the news?
Devastated, sad for her family. Yeah. What
were your kind of memories of the Queen?
I think when I came here as a young boy with my family, and being in awe and wonder of the palace, probably. I'm really sorry I have to go.
No, that's fine. No. Lots of people coming down trying to get to the Green Park and lay flowers, so many floral tributes. In fact, they had to remove them from outside Buckingham Palace, Lucy, because there was just too many people, thousands and thousands of people coming down here. Even Green Park Tube Station, which is the nearest tube station, you know, that very rarely stops or shuts for anything. London is open all the time, but that closed today because there were so many people. And I don't know if you can see Buckingham Palace, it's very dark tonight, but the Royal Standard is still flying. Now, Prince Charles isn't actually in Buckingham Palace at the moment. He's just round the corner in Clarence House. So he's in the Royal Estate, so the flag is still flying above Buckingham Palace. And I'm sure tomorrow there's going to be even more people coming down. If on a Saturday night you're getting crowds like this, you won't be able to see, but what I can see is thousands and thousands of people still queuing to come and lay flowers for the Queen and also to welcome the King.
Charlotte, I got the tube into the BBC today and there were so many hundreds of people, and of course Green Park Station was closed as well, but there were so many people on the tube and I was talking to them about their memories of the Queen. And as you speak to people there today, does it feel like there's any kind of generational divide in terms of the stories and things that they're sharing, the memories that they're sharing?
Definitely. I think when you speak to people of the Queen's generation, or perhaps a bit younger, they remember her as a young woman, becoming a mother, becoming a grandmother, and they say they felt like they grew up with her. They had grandchildren around the same time. And then when you speak to younger people, especially children, they of course talk about the Jubilee, they talk about Paddington. Someone else mentioned today, of course, about when the Queen, well, not the Queen obviously, jumped out of a plane to open the London 2012 Olympics. And what's really interesting is there's people from right across the world. I spoke to a man from Germany. Him and his girlfriend were on holiday in Paris this week. When they heard that Queen Elizabeth had died, they decided to change their holiday and they've come to London. And like I said, they're going to stay for the rest of the week and really take in the atmosphere, because it does feel like a really momentous moment, not just for the UK, but for the world. I mean, we saw the front pages of newspapers right across the world, and Queen Elizabeth was on the front cover of practically every single one. She was the world's most famous woman. And I think a lot of people come as well, they want to pay their respects to King Charles because he's got a really difficult task. He's obviously grieving his mum and is now taking on, you know, probably the most high-profile job in the world.
Charlotte Gallagher there. We have had a really lovely statement from Prince William, the Prince of Wales, paying tribute to the Queen. We wanted to share part of it with you. He said, on Thursday, the world lost an extraordinary leader whose commitment to the country, the realms and the Commonwealth was absolute. My grandmother famously said that grief was the price we pay for love. All of the sadness we will feel in the coming weeks will be testament to the love that we felt for our extraordinary Queen. And I will honour her memory by supporting my father, the King, in every way that I can. And a short while after Prince William issued that statement, we did see him and the Princess of Wales, accompanied by the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. They came out of the castle and here they are looking at the floral tributes and greeting well wishes as well. This was, I have to say, a bit of a surprise for many people, not expecting the two couples to appear together, but they spent some time conversing with the crowd. It seems making real connections, what we're hearing with people there, and Daniela Rolfe was amongst them.
Unexpected and unannounced, nobody had seen this coming. After the rancour and the conflict, the fallout and the friction, this was a family reunited in grief. The new Prince and Princess of Wales, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, together in Windsor to view the flowers and see those who had come to mourn the Queen. All eyes were on them. The brothers have barely spoken to each other for 2 years, but today something clearly shifted. Harry and Meghan walked down one side of the crowd on Windsor's long walk up to the castle, chatting, receiving flowers and condolences. On the other side were William and Catherine, doing much the same, particularly focusing on families and children who had come out to remember the Queen. It's hard to imagine quite how this moment came about. Perhaps the public outpouring of love for the Queen and the weight of responsibility their father now bears caused Harry and William to find a peace that has previously been hard to reach. It was an extraordinary moment of solidarity that seemed to please all those there to witness it. In her death, the Queen appears to have helped heal a damaging rift as the royal family comes together to say their farewell. Daniela Ralph, BBC News.
Well, the Queen's three youngest children, Princess Anne and Princess Andrew and Edward, along with their families, they are still at Balmoral, but today, following a church service, they also took time to read and admire the growing floral tributes outside the castle gates. From there, Sarah Campbell reports.
It's not long now until the late Queen leaves this beautiful part of Scotland forever, a place which was so close to her heart. Before she starts her final journey tomorrow, people travelled here to say their own goodbyes. The Queen's family was on the minds of many of those here today, and this afternoon the castle gates opened, and in convoy, 3 of the Queen's children, Prince Andrew, Prince Edward, Princess Anne and their families, made their way to the local church for a private service.
During her lifetime, the Queen talked about the strength and comfort she found through her faith. And during the long summer months here on the Balmoral estate, she worshipped here at Crathy Kirk. In its familiar surroundings, her family came together today to pray.
It was a short service, and afterwards the 3 families left the vehicles and walked across the bridge over the River Dee to the people who had come to pay their respects.
This is a family event, and I just feel incredibly solemn that they've got such a solemn time ahead of them as a family.
It's important that he's aware, because of course he'll only know really a king rather than a queen.
Yeah. It's so sad, you know, to see her go, and it will be look so different. It's just amazing. She was such an amazing woman. Too much.
It is still just 2 days since the Queen died, and the emotion was clear as family members comforted one another, taking time to read some of the hundreds of messages left at the castle gates in tribute to their mother and grandmother. Before returning back behind castle walls, they stopped and looked back. Prince Andrew, in a rare public appearance, led a wave, which was acknowledged by the crowd. A mutual recognition of the loss the family and the nation is coming to terms with.
Sarah Campbell there. The UK's cabinet has had an audience with King Charles after he was formally proclaimed monarch in succession to the late Queen. Liz Truss took her senior ministers to Buckingham Palace to be received by the sovereign for the first time. Following the cabinet audiences, the King then spent time meeting the leaders of Britain's opposition parties, including the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer. The Houses of Parliament convened today as well for special sessions to mark the death of the Queen, and members of Parliament have been swearing allegiance to the King as the new head of state. From Westminster, Damien Grammaticus reports.
This is a time of change and continuity too. Written in Westminster's stones, King's past, as a new one ascends at the apex of things.
I swear by Almighty God that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty King Charles, his heirs and successors, according to law, so help me God.
I swear by Almighty God that I will be...
MPs didn't have to make a new pledge today, but those that chose to could also choose the form it took.
According to law, so help me God.
I do solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty King Charles, his heirs and successors, according to law.
So even in this time of mourning, political life moves forward. New King with his new Prime Minister and her new cabinet. The tone relaxed, almost familiar. A former Prime Minister says the King has been preparing for this moment.
I had audiences with Prince Charles when Queen Elizabeth II was still on the throne, because he wanted to start thinking about how to conduct those audiences. And from what I saw, he will be brilliant at that. job, brilliant at listening, brilliant at asking questions, giving wise advice and sage counsel. I mean, this has probably been the longest apprenticeship in history.
Your Majesty.
Ushered in next, Sir Keir Starmer with praise for the new King's first address.
I thought his speech yesterday was fantastic.
Who did you? It was so reassuring.
So reassuring, he said.
Really, that's far too long.
Then the Liberal Democrat leader. He gave condolences and said he hoped to discuss shared interests with the King.
We'd love to talk to you about similar issues of the environment and climate change and so forth, but can I first of all offer my sincere condolences? Thank you very much.
And finally, the Scottish National Party's leader in Westminster. In the coming days, the King will tour the nation. Edinburgh, Cardiff and Belfast. The Prime Minister will accompany him. Back in the Palace of Westminster all afternoon, more tributes have been paid.
She represented us when we were united. She spoke for those times when we were gloriously happy and celebrating, or she spoke for those times when there was misery and gloom and she had to deal with our grief and point to the better tomorrow.
She did it for dozens of us.
The Queen made a habit of inviting ministers and councillors to private teas to thank them once out of office.
Because it showed how privately, even more than publicly, she believed in selfless duty and valuing public service to our country.
And now it's the nation's turn to thank her, a funeral to be held here, as for kings and queens who came before. David Grammaticus, BBC News, Westminster.
Many current and former world leaders have paid tribute to the Queen. Speaking yesterday, the former US President Barack Obama said Her Majesty was one of the handful of people he met in office who was exactly as he expected her to be, and said he was fortunate to have known her. Mr. Obama visited Buckingham Palace as part of a state visit to the UK in 2011, and travelling with him was Tommy Vita, who was a former advisor to the President, came with him, as I mentioned, on that visit. Tommy, I know that they had met before, President Obama, his wife Michelle, and the Queen, of course, but how did he prepare for a visit like that?
You know, first of all, Lizzie, thank you for having me on, and I just want to offer my condolences to you and to your listeners. I know this is a difficult time. I mean, I think, you know, President Obama is someone who is preternaturally calm in a lot of situations. You know, I was with him at the 2004 convention speech that kind of launched his political career. I was around him on big election nights. But I think even he and even the First Lady were a little nervous about that first meeting with the Queen, because she is this singular figure and it's someone who is known around the world, and you want to make a first impression that goes over well. So, you know, I think he probably worried a little bit extra about it.
And once they met, what did he say?
I think that, I mean, you know, look, without getting into specific conversations they had, I think President Obama believed, and I think certainly those of us who worked for him at the time believed, that the Queen went out of her way to make him and the First Lady feel welcome. And that might come as no surprise to your audience, who are used to hearing stories about her kindness to strangers and just sort of core decency in even the most stressful moments. But I do think it is an increasingly rare thing in politics. And frankly, it was a contrast to the way he was greeted by other political figures, including Boris Johnson, who greeted Barack Obama with some, you know, pretty overt racism when he said Obama had a part Kenyan ancestral dislike of the British Empire for some ridiculous reason because he redecorated the Oval Office. So, you know, I think that the Queen's kindness and core decency left an impression on him, left an impression on all those around him, and on the First Lady as well.
And President Obama has said that the Queen was truly one of his favourite people. He has met some remarkable people in his time, so that is a lovely tribute to her. What were the sort of qualities, do you think, as well, that he admired particularly? And I wonder, he also admired the diplomacy that she was able to show.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they got along well. They had a similar sense of humor. I think her wryness came through. I think, you know, I think they spent some time when they sat next to each other at the 70th anniversary of D-Day in Normandy in 2014. I believe they were seated next to each other and got to spend a considerable amount of time. I think, you know, when you think about her and you think about all that she has seen in her lifetime, from delivering a radio speech at 14 years old in the middle of the Second World War until today, it's hard not to be awestruck by the sort of singular nature of who she is and what she has meant to the British people. And for someone that powerful and influential to be just as kind in person to you as you thought they might be based on what you read, I think is an incredibly special thing.
She met with 13 of the last 14 US presidents, Tommy, and there are some lovely stories. Her taking Ronald Reagan on a horse ride when he was in England, sending Dwight Eisenhower, I think, a recipe for Scottish pancakes because he enjoyed them when he was at Balmoral. She went to a baseball game as well with George Bush. There are some lovely stories. She had a particular fondness for America too. How important do you think the Queen was in terms of fostering that special relationship between the UK and the US?
I mean, that's a great question. I think, you know, at this time when politics can feel like it's becoming inexorably more coarse and more sort of silly, she was the opposite. She was someone who was kind and decent and sought to bring the countries together, even when, frankly, it probably wasn't very fun. It was probably not the best time for her when she had to spend time with Donald Trump, for example. And I apologize to everyone on behalf of the United States for him coming over there and for you guys having to see him on TV for 4 years. We're not happy about it either. But I think her ability to sort of smooth over political differences by sheer force of personality is something that's important and probably did contribute significantly to the special relationship over the past 7 decades.
And Tommy, can you give us a sense of what Americans think of King Charles?
You know, I don't know that they know yet. I think a lot of that is ahead of us. I think I mean, I'm 42 years old. All of us grew up, my mother grew up just knowing about the Queen. So I think we're all about to find out. We know a little bit about William. We know a little bit about Harry. I actually think President Obama and Harry get along quite well and, you know, are sort of chums. But I don't know, we'll find out.
Great to talk to you. Tommy Vito, thank you very much for sharing your memories and giving us some insights into Barack Obama and his relationship with Queen Elizabeth. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Let's bring you up to date with some other news now, because there are big developments in Ukraine. After months of deadlock, the counteroffensive against Russia is gathering momentum. More territory recaptured in the south and east of Ukraine. And President Zelensky has said his forces have now retaken 2,000 square kilometers in the last month. Ukrainian troops are now said to have entered Kupiansk, a railway city that has acted as a key logistics center for Russian forces in the northeast since February. In some areas, the Russian retreat is said to have been a rout, and there are reports that the Russians have pulled out from around Izium. Moscow says they are regrouping elsewhere. From central Ukraine, our senior international correspondent, Orla Guerin, reports.
Ukraine's rapid counter-offensive is gaining ground. Its troops taking some casualties, but also taking territory on several fronts. Catching Russian forces off guard, even surprising some Ukrainians. This footage was filmed by Ukrainian forces. We can't document the battles ourselves. For now, journalists have been banned from the front lines. Kyiv determined to win the information war. And images of victory from the eastern city of Kupiansk. This was a key logistics hub for President Putin's men. In some areas, Russia's front line has collapsed. And liberation has come. Everything is okay, troops tell locals in the town of Balaklia. For 6 months we prayed you would come, she says. Natalia, too, endured months under occupation by